wanted to be trained with one of those guys who was kind of I drew Iron Man for 45 years, but I always wanted to do this thing, and I never got to do it. And I thought, well, I just had a couple really odd jobs I'd done in comics, and I was kind of looking around going, what do I do next? Do I do another Batman, or another Alien, or another, whatever? Or do I take the chance and just once, not making a commercial necessarily, but let me just make it once. That's exactly the kind of stuff I like. And chances are I'll only get to do it once. But at least I'll be able to point back at this thing and say, once I got a chance to put my personality, onto the page. And I did design it so that if by any chance it did work, I would, I wouldn't get sick of drawing it. Because I'd never drawn anything for more than about a year. I'd never drawn any one character for any one time. So the idea of doing help with 10 years just never occurred to me.
That's a very quick overview. It's opening up to some questions.
Yeah.
Anybody? Did we answer everything?
Yes, please.
Yeah, I mean, Lovecraft and a lot of the guys who wrote in the pulps in the 20s and 30s were a huge influence. And I wanted to have a background mythology in Hellboy that was similar to what Lovecraft had, that idea that there were these gigantic cosmic forces at work. And the beauty of Lovecraft is it kind of staggers sort of a science fiction idea, but it's also a horror mystery thing. I certainly didn't want to do science fiction, but I wanted I wanted a mythology behind it. So what I kind of did was take a lot of different creation myths or world mythologies and look for common themes, and then attach this kind of Lovecraftian element.
Yeah. It's not the usual one. Now the Hellboy movie Hellboy comics.
Have they added to it?
Added to the mythology was the way you approach the stories.
No, well, the films haven't changed what I do at all, because other than attracting certain readers. One thing I've been bound to determine not to do is alter anything that's in my plan for the comic to jive with the movie. So, if it's in the movie, it was either something Guillermo and I came up with or it's something he came up with, but it's separate from what I do. And in fact, if he does a third film, which would kind of round out, the Hellboy trilogy, I gotta make really sure I never tell him how I plan to end the Hellboy series, because I can't have him take my ending and stick it on the third film, which would be about 20 years before we get to my ending. So I've had to be a little bit cagey around Guillermo and not tell him, what my plans are.
The way you see the characters go.
Not that I tried. I like to think that the film hasn't altered the way I do stuff. I might hear Ron Perlman's mannerisms a little bit more in Hellboy, because Hellboy was actually modeled on my father, and Ron is close enough in temperament to my father that it was very easy for me to accept Ron as Hellboy, because that's what Ron's like in real life. The one note Guillermo would give to Ron periodically was, stop acting. Because, the first time, I remember Ron was we were up at the Rick Baker Creature Shop, and Ron wasn't in makeup, and they hadn't even worked out the makeup yet. He was just getting his body cast or something. And he was just sitting around telling stories. And Guillermo and I were laughing our asses off, because it already sounded like Hellboy.
You said you have your aim. Does this mean that Hellboy is a finite series? It might take you 20 years to get there.
Yeah, it's a very odd ending, because it's an ending where the series can continue or not, but at least the story is thought up to a certain point. It's not like a Batman or Superman where it's designed to go on forever. In fact, the series I'm doing now and the series I'm writing, the next one coming up, there were some very definite changes that start happening with the character. It's great. The first 10, 15 years I've been kind of figuring out what I'm doing and getting all the kind of players out there. And now that all the pieces are there, I'm starting to actually tell the real story. So it's, after all these years, to make certain decisions and write certain things, it's like having Hellboy turn certain corners and going, now that he's there, can't go back. So the character does change as things happen.
Doing a lot of writing lately, Mike, and not so much on the artwork side, or at least anything that's been published. Do you tend to go back to drawing the Hellboy strips?
I don't actually tend to go back to drawing the Hellboy strip full time. I mean, there are places in the storyline. Well, first off, Duncan Fegredo's doing a fantastic job, and I don't know that most people would want me back at this point. But there are certain places, me being greedy, there's certain scenes that I made up. I'm saying when Duncan gets to that part, I'm going to step in for 5 pages and do that bit. The truth is, I've got a lot of other projects I've wanted to do, smaller, more personal, weird things. So I love Hellboy, but I feel like I've done it. You know, when I draw Hellboy now, I kind of go, yep, that's what he's supposed to look like. You know, there's a challenge in the storytelling, but there's not a challenge in the drawing. So I kind of want to do some stuff that challenges me a little bit more as an artist. But we will. I mean, my goal is by the end of next year to be able to get in and start working on my own stories. Yeah.
Speaking of the transition between writing and art, what was the change like for you between being doing some work almost the entirety? I do remember that there was someone else who had the script.
Yeah, I had done one or two things I did a Hellblazer story Hellraiser story at Marvel that I plotted and someone else scripted. And I did this Batman book at DC that I plotted and someone else scripted. So I was liking the idea of making up the story, but I never considered myself a writer. It never even occurred to me that I would write the stuff. So I spoke to John Byrne, who I'd worked with in the past, and we had a pretty good working relationship. I said, would you help me out with this thing? And originally I thought I would just come up with a vague idea and he would write up the plot. But what happened while, over the period of time while I was finishing up another job, I just kept putting the pieces of the Hellboy story together. So eventually, I had the whole plot, I drew the whole book, and then, I ended up kind of half scripting it, because otherwise John wouldn't know what the story was. So I kind of wrote the book, gave it to John for him to rewrite. And I couldn't have done it without him. There was just no way I had the confidence to actually turn in a book and say, here, I've done the whole thing myself. I needed a professional involved. So what happened over the course of that first 4-issue miniseries, as John rewrote things, there were places where I went, yeah, that's good. Not like what I had. And he knew it. He knew all along that I should be writing the book myself. So he really just acted as a guy who was like training wheels on a bicycle. He just was there until I was comfortable enough. And basically when we got to the end of the 4-issue miniseries, he said, there you go, you're on your own. I mean, we didn't have a big blow up or there was no, bad blood at all. He was always preparing me to take over the book. And I don't know a lot of other writers who would work with somebody on something. It's a create your own book, and he had no part in that thing. He just said, I'm just there to help you out. And he never tried to make it our book. He certainly never tried to make it his book. He never even tried to make it our book. He named a few of the characters, but he never introduced any plot ideas at all.